2-hour training, so I've got 30 minutes to do a lot of stuff with you all. There on the handouts, the last sheet is a question sheet. If I don't have time to go over something that you want me to answer, please write it on that sheet, and there's a basket in the back. You can put it in there. At the end of the training, I have this today and tomorrow. We're going to do an FAQ that I'm going to pass out to all of the schools to make sure that you all get that, so that I can make sure I'm answering anything that you all may have. Real quickly, I am Miranda Hughes. I am the Child Protective Service and Adult Protective Service Supervisor for Russell County Social Services. I've been there for 7.5 years, and I've been supervisor for 3. And this is Jessica Price. She is one of my CPS workers who is going to be coming out and working with children and families. First, by show of hands, how many of you have been through a child abuse and neglect training before? Okay. I did this about 3 years ago. We did the first one, and it was a lot more detailed, and it included photographs and everything on what to look for. We do not have time to go into that today. I will tell you that there is an online training if you feel like you need to take it. It is on the Virginia DSS website. It is called a mandated reporter training. I know that teachers are required to take that, but anyone is able to do that. It's on the public website, and it goes into a lot more detail than I'm going to be able to go into today. There is an agenda in your handout, but I'm going to kind of be jumping around to make sure that I get everything done today that needs to be done. First off, there are several types of abuse and neglect defined by the Code of Virginia. Those include physical abuse, physical neglect, mental abuse, sexual abuse, and substance-exposed infants. This training is designed to go over physical abuse, physical neglect, and sexual abuse, because those are the kinds of things you all are going to be dealing with at school. In Virginia, an abused or neglected child must be less than 18 years of age. The person alleged to have abused the child must be a parent or other person responsible for the child's care. That can be a teacher or a babysitter or someone who's responsible for that child. The condition reported must rise to the level of abuse or neglect as defined by the code section. If you feel like something is abuse or neglect, you can call it into us, but we're going to be using the Code of Virginia to determine if it rises to the level of something that we need to look into. We're quickly going to go into physical abuse. Can anybody tell me the difference between abuse and discipline? Okay. Discipline is a learning process. The goal is to teach an appropriate behavior. Through discipline, you're teaching that child that they need to change their behavior for some reason. Abuse is not a learning process. The goal is to stop the behavior through inflicting pain, and abuse teaches avoidance of pain, not an alternative. The intent of Virginia's child abuse statute is not to interfere with parental discipline. Corporal punishment is legal in the state of Virginia. Child Protective Services becomes involved when that corporal punishment leads to bruises or welts or other marks on that child. At that point, it becomes an issue. Physical abuse is legally defined as any act, regardless of intent, that results in serious, non-accidental physical injury, and it most often represents unreasonably severe corporal punishment, and usually happens out of anger and frustration. Examples of that would be fractures, bruises, internal injuries, and sprains. A child may have behavioral indicators to show that they're the victim of physical abuse. And those can be that they're uncomfortable with physical contact, that they're wary of any kind of adult contact with them. They're apprehensive when they hear other children cry. They may have behavior extremes. They could be very aggressive, or they could be very withdrawn. Could be either of those extremes. They could be afraid to go home, or they may actually make a report to you that they're being physically abused at home. Any questions on abuse? Again, I don't have a lot of time to go into a lot of detail, and I apologize for that. We're quickly going to go into neglect. Unlike physical abuse, which you can see, and there are signs of it, and I can look for bruises, and I can look for welts on abuse. For neglect, it's a little bit harder to find. It's generally perceived as unacceptable, and it's much more subjective. It's influenced by community standards. What may be acceptable for one community may not be acceptable for another. Socioeconomic status. That can influence one's perception of an adequate home environment. What I may think is an adequate home environment, somebody else may think is not. It's very subjective. And whether you are a parent or not can also influence how you feel like a parent should be. Virginia's legal definition of neglect is designed to ensure that a child's minimal needs are met. The statutory definition is the failure to provide for a child's physical survival needs, including food, clothing, shelter, supervision, or health care to the extent that the child's health or safety is endangered. Just because you have a dirty house does not mean that you are neglecting your child. It's very subjective. We get reports all the time of this person has a dirty house, you need to go in there and look at it, see what's going on. Doesn't mean that they're neglecting their child. What your standard for a dirty house is could be completely different. We have to show that this is affecting the child and that their minimal needs are not being met through that house being dirty. Neglect does not include parental failure to obtain preventative health care. Parents have the right to choose if they want their children to get their immunizations or not. I cannot interfere on that. Parents have the right to choose if they want their children to have well child checks at the doctor, and I can't interfere. Neglect does not include failure of a child to attend school. That is a truancy issue that the school system has their own statutes on and their own way of dealing with. I can't get involved just because a child isn't coming to school regularly. It also does not include failure to use a seatbelt. That is a civil violation with law enforcement. I can't go out and act just because somebody's not putting a seatbelt on their child or they're not putting their infant in a car seat. That does not rise to the level of child abuse and neglect for CPS to get involved on. That's a law enforcement thing. Younger children are at greater risk due to their inability to meet their own basic survival needs. There is a correlation between poverty and neglect, although poverty is closely related, because when you're poor, it is more difficult to meet your child's needs. However, the majority of people who are poor do not neglect their children. So just because it's harder for you to meet those needs does not mean that you're going to neglect your kids just because you're of a different status. Poverty is when a parent doesn't have the financial means to meet their child's needs and or there's no resources available. That could be a single parent whose child needs dental care, but the family has no insurance and there's a 3-month waiting list at the dental clinic. That does not mean they're neglecting their child. They don't have the means to meet what that child needs, and they're doing their best to meet that by being on that waiting list. Neglect is when resources and financial means are available, but those needs still aren't being met. If a parent has the ability to take the child to the dentist because they need dental care, but they're just not doing it, then that is neglect. I'm going to go over a couple of things, and I want you all to tell me if you feel like this is neglect. Parental substance abuse. Who feels like that would be neglect? Y'all are a lot quieter than my last group. It can be, but it is not an absolute neglect. If we get a report of a parent using drugs, or alcohol, that in itself is not neglect. You have to be able to tell me how their substance abuse is causing neglect of their child. You can be a functioning alcoholic, and you can be a functioning drug addict, and you could be meeting your child's needs while you also have your own issues going on and you're using your substances, but your kids are taken care of, they're fed, and you're meeting their needs. When you stop meeting those needs because of your addiction, that's when it becomes physical neglect that we get involved in. And if we get a report, if you call us and you say that you feel like we need to look into a situation because mom and dad are using drugs, the first thing we're going to ask you is, well, how is that creating neglect on that child? A child sent to school in clothes that are inappropriate for the weather. That is not neglect. That can be correlated to poverty. Parents may not be able to afford summer clothes for a child, and all they have is long sleeve shirts and pants, and so they have to send their child to school with that. That's not neglect. They're doing the best that they can to meet those child's needs. And they're meeting their needs because they're clothed. They're coming to school with clothes on. So at that point, it's not neglect. A child and their clothing are chronically dirty and smell. That is neglect at that point. If it is a chronic condition that parents are not meeting, then at that point we're going to step in and we're going to look and see what's going on. Why are mom and dad not cleaning the child's clothes? Why are they not bathing the child? If it's a chronic condition, we're going to look at it. Any questions on neglect? Okay, we're going to jump into sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is defined as illegal acts of sexual assault and exploitation of minors, and it can include incest, intercourse, fondling, indecent exposure, child pornography, and child prostitution. They can consist of acts perpetrated over a long period of time, or it could be one incident. It doesn't have to be a recurring thing. Sexual abuse can be a one-time thing. It often does not involve violence. A lot of times the perpetrator is using bribery, or they may be making threats to the child's family members or the child's pet, but most often they are not creating violence for that child. Victims include males and females. Perpetrators statistically are most often males, but they can be females as well. When you are looking for indicators of sexual abuse, you have to be able to determine if it is an indicator of sexual abuse or is it a normal childhood behavior. Some normal preschool sexual behavior they're curious and they're exploring themselves and they're discovering themselves, and that's normal for children of a preschool age. Their specific sexual behaviors could include touching, masturbation, interest in bathroom functions. They may want to show their genitals. They may have dirty talk. They may play house and play doctor. And those are normal things for a child. That in and of itself does not mean that they're being sexually abused. Indicators for sexual abuse are bruises, difficulty walking or sitting, detailed age-inappropriate discussion. If they can explain something to you that is completely age-inappropriate, then there's an indicator that they know way more than they need to. They may reenact abuse using dolls or drawings or try to reenact things with their friends, and that's inappropriate. They may have unusually seductive behaviors with their peers or with adults. Or they may have a sudden awareness of sexual acts and words. Those are the things that we're looking for and that we're asking schools to look for. You all are the ones that are with the kids every day, and so with all of these categories, you all are the ones who are seeing these things, and that's what we need. Any questions on sexual abuse? Okay. In your handouts, you have right from the Code of Virginia is the mandated reporter law. All of you are considered mandated reporters. And it says that you shall report immediately any suspected child abuse and neglect. You do not have to have evidence to show that that abuse or neglect is happening. That's my job. We're going to be coming out and finding all that evidence that goes with it. You just have to have that suspicion that something's going on. And at that point, you can call us and make a report, and we'll investigate it. Also in your handout is, on the back of the mandated reporter law, is the information that we're going to ask you when you call in a report to us. You don't have to have all of this information, but this is what we're going to ask you to have. We need the basic information for the child and for the caretaker where this child is. And we're going to need you to explain to us very detailed on what's going on that makes you think that there's abuse or neglect with that child. If you don't have the child's birth date or social, you could still make a report to us. It's not a requirement. We can get that later. And actually, it's usually all of you all who are coming to the office and say, can you pull this child's information, or we're calling you to see. So you do have access to it, but you don't have to have it when you make the report. The Code of Virginia allows for Child Protective Services to come in and interview any child who is suspected to be abused or neglected. We do not have to have permission from a parent or from a guardian to talk to a child. And a lot of times those parents and guardians don't know that we're coming to talk to their child because we don't want them to tell their kids what to say and what not to say. We don't want them to change their story. So we come to the school a lot because parents aren't sitting in the next room. Kids aren't afraid because mom and dad are right there listening. So we talk to the kids there. And there's a lot of questions sometimes we get asked, well, how can you legally go do that? The code allows for us to come into a school or into a home or anywhere and talk to a child without consent from a parent. We also have the right to remove a child if we feel like their safety is at risk. That's the most extreme thing that we do, but we do have that right to do a removal of a child and take custody of them and take them with us. Our mission is to respond to abuse and neglect, to assess the child's safety, and to maintain that family unit while we're providing services to the family. We don't want to come in and just remove a child out of the home and put them in foster care. We try to do everything that we can with services and with our involvement to make sure that that child stays in the home with mom and dad, with our support, so that we can end the abuse and neglect that's going on. When we go out on a Child Protective Services case, we are going to interview the child. We're going to interview their siblings. We're going to interview anybody that's in that home. We're also going to be seeing the child's home. And we're going to see the place where this abuse or neglect happened, and we're going to see how the parents interact with their children. We're going to be talking to any collaterals. That could be doctors, teachers, anybody who has frequent contact with that child that can give us more information about the allegations we're looking into. We also have access to any records that we may need. HIPAA does not apply to Child Protective Services. We have access to any medical records we need. We have access to any school records we need, and it's not uncommon for us to come into the office of the school and say, I need records on this child, and that's what we're going to have to get to see if we can put everything together. We have two tracks when we go out on a case. We're either going to do a family assessment on a family, or we're going to do an investigation on a family. A family assessment is going to be for the more minor things that we're looking into, and with that, we go out and we assess it, we provide services, but there's no disposition at the end. We never say at the end that, yes, that child was abused or neglected. An investigation, there is a determination made at the end. Those are reserved for severe physical abuse, sexual abuse. If you've had multiple reports within a year, we're going to do an investigation on you. And we're going to determine at the end if that abuse or neglect happened. When we do that, we pick from 3 levels. If we feel like you have abused or neglected a child, we're going to pick a level 1, which means we're going to maintain your name in our system with the records for 18 years. We can go to a level 2, which is 7 years, and a level 3, which is 3 years. At the end of that time period, the records are purged from our system. Those go into the central registry. If we do a finding, that does not mean that it's going to pop up on a criminal background check. These are reserved for their own type of background check, which is a central registry check. I believe anyone who works for the school system has to go through a central registry check. We get them for anyone who's going to work with children, teachers, school employees, daycare, any volunteers for the school system I know have to go through a central registry. And those come back and show you, or show whoever has sent off for that, if you have been founded to have abused or neglected a child. Family assessments do not show up on a central registry check. Any questions so far? We've only got a few more minutes. I've hit the main points. There is in your handout a sheet and it says where to report. It has the phone number for Russell County Social Services on there. We are in the office from 8 to 4:30 and there is someone available anytime you're in office hours to take your report. Outside of regular hours, you can contact the sheriff's office to get our on-call worker. I have someone who is on call 24/7, or we have a hotline that you can call. And all of those numbers are on that sheet for you. We also have magnets with our phone number and where to report on them. They're going to be sent out to the schools probably Thursday. We're going to come out and give them. So those may be in the office as well for everybody to have to put up wherever they're going to be. Any questions? Y'all are very quiet. The other class had a lot of questions. I feel like I've stood up here and given you all a lot of information in a short amount of time. So if you're confused about anything that I've gone over, you have any questions or want me to go into detail on anything, please let me know.
I do have a question.
Okay.
We have parents in the past, and I presume will in the future, that, or guardians come in and says, I now have custody of this child. DSS will send you something. We don't get it. What do we do?
You can call us. A lot of time when we do something, we can place a child out with another family member on a safety plan, and that's just a contract that we've done with the parents. It's not a legally binding document, and a lot of times that person that has taken the child is supposed to provide that to the school, and they're told when that's done, and we usually will provide them an extra copy and say, you need to take this to the school, make sure they know. But anytime there's a question about that, call us, because we're going to let you know. Now, as far as custody orders and things, if we have asked someone to file for custody of a child, there's a lot of times we don't have that court order, and the court can provide us with that court order, so that guardian is responsible for getting that to you all.
Now, how do we know when a safety plan is no longer enforceable? Because a lot of times they'll bring you in and then they'll come in and say, well, they don't count it.
If you ever question it, call us and we'll let you know. If we're saying that a safety plan's not there anymore, then the child's back with the parents. The other alternative is that safety plan is not in effect anymore because we've gone to court and gotten a legal document, like a child protective order or a removal order. And there's always been questioned because of confidentiality stuff. We have previously been told that we can't provide that to the school, that it's the parent's responsibility or the guardian's responsibility. My attorney is looking at that now because we've had some questions pop up. And we are hoping that starting this year that we'll be able to send you all the child protective orders when those are in effect. The problem is, a lot of times we have a lot of these going on, and a lot of times we're not gonna remember to send it to you all when it's not in effect anymore. The parents are responsible for that, or the guardian, whoever has that child, and they're told that up front to get that paperwork to you all.
Well, our issue we had last year was, I think she ended up being 3 different. And so the parent that was having her could never get us what we needed, like, we had to change addresses and all that, and do the pick up. So she never could get it to us. She never had it, saying, she kept saying they were supposed to send it to the school, but we, like, all through the years. And she came in the other day wanting to know what she needed to do.
Is it a parent that a child is still placed out on?
She's not with the parents, she's kind of, I guess, with a safety plan, or, she said,
The
she never
parent
could
will-
get us, because we don't know, anybody could say that.
The parent will always have a copy of the safety plan. When that,
This is not the parent, the parent's been taken out of the parent.
the person that the child's been placed with, when we do a safety plan, it's a carbonated sheet and we're handing out copies to everybody. And the person that's getting the child is getting a copy of it because that's their document showing that they have that child. The parent has a copy of it because the parent has to sign off on it. And then we have the original in our office. So anytime that you don't have paperwork, but a parent is telling you that we have done something, you can call me. I'm usually always in the office. I've got a caseload right now, so I'm out a lot, but I'm floating around to the schools. So, a lot of people in your school, check with your principal too. If you can't get a hold of me, because a lot of these principals have my cell phone number and can find me. There's probably somebody in your school that has my cell phone number and can track me down too. But I will get you any of that paperwork that you need if you don't have it. Sometimes parents will come and tell you all things that
See, that's what
that's
we
not
haven't
true.
had, that's what I'm saying, you
Right.
can't just change it on.
Right.
Maybe they're just hanging out with that parent. We've got to have the document before we
Right.
change it on.
And there is no document, when a safety plan is taken out of effect, there's usually not a document that goes with that, but you can always call and verify with us and we'll let you know, what's going on with that. And if a child should be there or not. I think that parents sometimes think that we're not gonna give it to you all, but we will give you safety plans and things. Absolutely, anytime that you all need that, call me and I can get it for you. My business cards are in the back also, if you all need my contact info, that has my office number on it. But somebody always knows how to track me down if you can't get me in the office. Anybody else? They told me to be done by 9:50. It looks like we have like 2 more minutes, so I know that was a lot, really rushed, and I apologize. If you feel like you need me to explain anything else or have any questions, please write it down on that sheet and put it in the back, and I'll be sending those out. There is a certificate in your packet too, showing that you work here today. You'll just have to fill in your name on it and today's date. But those have been signed off on. No, you can take all of that with you. You'll just have to put your name on it.
Especially the PJs, and they're all washed, I guess more strong, and I don't know what. I think we go back over to the other building and do it now. I think we still go down. It's right beside the recycling center. I think that's what you're doing.
It's good to see you.
I left my car.
I'll